Welcome back to the church history.
Bienvenidos al estudio de la historia de la Iglesia.
Who would like to open us up in prayer today?
Si alguien quiere orar para empezar.
Lord God, thank you for bringing us here this evening. Thank you for this Bible study and thank you for the room we have to do it. We just ask for your blessing on everyone in this room and just open our ears to hear your word this evening.
Amen. So I'm super excited to get going today.
Que estoy muy emocionado para empezar hoy.
This is Taking a Step Back Part 2 from last week, Part 1.
Que es, el título es Tomando un paso detrás y es la segunda parte.
So normally church history starts at the beginning of the second century with the death of the Apostle John.
Entonces normalmente empezamos el estudio de la historia de la Iglesia con la muerte del apóstol de Juan.
And we've already looked at the situation that the second century church has found themselves in.
Y ya lo hemos repasado cómo llega a ese punto la Iglesia primitiva.
And then last week we began taking a step back to see how they got themselves into that situation in the first place.
Entonces la semana pasada estuvimos viendo el segundo siglo y cómo llegaba a ese punto en el segundo siglo.
And this week is going to be a continuation of that.
Y esa semana vamos a continuar al terminar.
So last week we saw how the Jews were dispersed all over the world through the diaspora and through Greek Hellenism.
Entonces lo hemos visto como los judíos que fueron desparecidos por todas las partes del mundo por medio de lo que se llama la diáspora.
And we also saw how the LXX, which is the Septuagint, how it became the main translation or main version of the Christians as their Hebrew Bible.
Y lo hemos visto también la Septuaginte o LXX, como eso era la Biblia en general, en el idioma común.
So, and that's where we're going to pick up today. But before we do, does anybody have any questions over what we did last week or anything before we get going?
¿Alguien tiene preguntas de la semana pasada?
Nope, all good?
Todo bien.
So, what we need to do this week is talk a little bit more about Hellenism.
Entonces, hoy vamos a hablar un poquito más de Helenismo.
Who can tell me what Hellenism is?
¿Alguien puede decir de esa filosofía helenismo? ¿Cómo es?
What is it?
¿Qué es?
Greek philosophy.
Yes, it was.
Era filosofía griega.
It was the Greek philosophy that the Greeks used to try to unite their empire.
Era filosofía griega que ellos usaban para unirse a el imperio de romano o griego.
And so during the diaspora, when the Jews were dispersed throughout all of the Roman Empire, they had to face Hellenism head on.
Entonces, durante la diáspora, cuando desapareció todos los judíos, ellos tenían que afrontarse con el helenismo.
Particularly those Jews who lived in Alexandria.
En particularmente los judíos que estaban viviendo en Alexandria.
Where's Alexandria?
¿Dónde está Alexandria?
It's in northern Egypt.
Que está en la norte de Egipto.
And so that was, and why would the Jews have to confront Hellenism head on, particularly in Alexandria?
Entonces, porque específicamente los judíos tenían que afrontarse con el helenismo en Alexandria.
They were pagan.
Porque la gente de Alexandria era gente pagana.
What else?
¿Qué más?
What was different about Alexandria?
Language.
¿Qué fue diferente de Alexandria de los demás pueblos o ciudades?
What was the language then?
Basically
idioma,
Greek everywhere.
El
Everyone
idioma
spoke
era
Greek.
griego por todas partes.
They had their own language, but almost everyone
But
spoke
in
Greek.
Egypt-
Tenía su propia lengua, pero
Well,
también todo el mundo
everybody
hablaba
learned
en
Greek.
griego.
On top of their regular languages.
And Alexandria, where it was like the capital, no?
Yeah.
There's loads of very intellectual.
Yes.
people
Entonces era
from
como el
everywhere, all the
capital,
knowledge,
capital, mucha gente
The best of the
muy
best.
inteligente, los
So
mejores.
basically, Alexandria was the city built by Alexander the Great, and everybody from all over the world, all the religious experts and intellectual and philosophical experts from the east, from the west, all of them, they came together and they rubbed shoulders there in Alexandria.
Entonces por eso fue construido por medio de Alejandro la Grande y era como que toda la gente de diferentes partes del mundo se codearon juntos.
And Alexandria, during the time of the Roman Empire, was the second largest city in the Roman Empire.
Y Alexandria era la ciudad, la segunda más grande ciudad de todo el imperio.
So this is kind of Cleopatra stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so Rome was the largest city, then Alexandria, then Antioch.
Roma era la más grande, Alexandria y Antíoco.
So within Judaism, there was a movement to prove that the ancient faith of Israel was compatible with the modern ideas of Hellenism.
Entonces, entre judaísmo estaba intentando algunos de ellos a ver si había cosas semejantes entre helenismo y judaísmo.
And these Jews became known as Hellenistic Jews.
Entonces, esos judíos se llamaban judíos helenísticos.
And then the Hebraic Jews were the ones who were more literalist and were anti-Hellenism and mostly gathered in Jerusalem and around Israel.
Entonces los judíos hebraicos eran los judíos tradicionales que básicamente estaban en Jerusalén.
So the person who became associated the most with Hellenistic Judaism, kind of like the founder of Hellenistic Judaism, was Philo in Alexandria.
Entonces, que fundó básicamente judaísmo, helenismo, era Filo.
So Philo was a contemporary of Jesus, living from 20 BC to 80 AD.
Filo vivía en el mismo momento de Jesús, de 20 hasta 80.
And what he sought out to do was to prove that pagan philosophy, at least the philosophy of Hellenism, was compatible with the Hebrew Bible.
Entonces, él quería hacer como prueba que filosofía pagana del helenismo, que había cosas de comparación de la Biblia hebraica.
Philo believed that the Hebrew prophets of the Old Testament foresaw the rise of Hellenism, and he's right, they did.
Entonces, Filo pensó que la gente de la Biblia hebraica, ellos han visto como profetizó de la filosofía del helenismo, el ascenso de eso.
And the main argument of the Hellenistic Jews was that Hellenism was influenced by ideas from Israel.
Y la cosa más importante de ese discurso era que el helenismo era influida por medio de las cosas hebraicas.
And this contained a little bit of truth as well.
Y eso también tenía algo de la verdad.
So, therefore, many of these ideas of the Greeks were developed from Hebrew scriptures in the eyes of Philo. And
What date is this?
This is 20 BC to 80 AD, when Philo was alive. That was when he was living.
Which
So,
is Jesus'
in between those
time.
years is when he started developing this idea. So, in order to reach these conclusions better, he had to interpret a lot of the Hebrew scriptures literally, allegorically or symbolically instead of literally.
Entonces, para llegar a ese punto,
Wasn't that almost impossible? Because if it's from those timelines, he's doing Old Testament before Christ.
Well,
And then he's got the New Testament.
Remember, there's
So
about-
how's he doing?
there's about 300 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Between the last book in the Old Testament and in the first book of the New Testament, there's about 300 years of...
I know, but I mean, he's got to go in with the two.
so he wouldn't
He's
have
doing
had
it
a
before
New
Christ,
Testament
because
then.
he was born 20 BC.
He wasn't a Christian. He was a
Right.
Jew.
He was a Jew.
He was a Jewish
So he
philosopher.
was going in with everything the Jews believed and harmonising Jewish scripture.
Hellenism. With
and
Hellenism.
then he had to teach about Jesus.
Well, the Christians came later.
Yeah.
So,
But was he teaching about Jesus?
No.
No. Right. Okay.
he was just a
Right,
Jew.
got you.
Just a Jewish philosopher.
Until he died.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with you now. Right. I thought he was trying to do the two things.
No.
Entonces solo clarificación de que él era hebreo y no era cristiano. Entonces él era como fundando esa filosofía de judíos como de helenismo.
And so from that time on, from the time of Philo on, and even before Philo, many began interpreting their scriptures very allegorically, very symbolically in Alexandria. So this school of thought in Alexandria was very symbolic interpretation of scripture.
Entonces en ese momento como que él estaba intentando ver más helenismo por medio de la Biblia hebreica, tenía que hacer una interpretación de la escritura más alegóricamente.
And then the Hebraic Jews that were coming out of Jerusalem were interpreting it very literally, so very two different ideas of interpretation coming out of this schools of thought.
Los judíos hebraicos, ellos eran lo tradicional, ellos siempre tenían la traducción muy literal.
You could say that he was key
Yes.
in God's plan
Yes.
to prepare the Old Testament in Alexandria.
Yes,
Right?
and that was the argument.
Ese hombre Filo era un clave para preparar esa escritura para que en los ojos de la gente común.
So when we talk about modern Greek Hellenism, we're not talking about their plethora of gods. We're talking about the modern, which is the ideas of Plato and the ideas of Socrates, were what the Christians were, the Jewish philosophers out of Alexandria were basing that ideas on.
Entonces no es diciendo que su forma de pensar era de adorar otros dioses o dioses paganos. Era solamente su forma de pensar en la filosofía de Plato y Sócrates y su forma de pensar o interpretación de la escritura.
See, Plato and Socrates believed in one God or one big idea of God as a being. And Philo tried to say that was no different from the one God of the Old Testament.
Que Plato y Sócrates también pensaba que había solo un Dios. Entonces Filo estaba diciendo, pero eso es igual que nosotros, los judíos.
And so he also believed that there was no difference between the morals of that time, because the Platonic and Socrates morals was, self-control, avoiding drunkenness, avoiding gluttony, those type of things. And he says those are the same things that Judaism teaches.
Entonces los principales también era igual, la forma de pensar de los judíos y la filosofía.
Anybody have any questions over that before we go a little bit further?
No, he was key, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Really?
A key person, very key. And so the early Christians, now we're going to start talking about Christianity, the early Christians living all over the empire, through the diaspora, through this spreading of Judaism, they were influenced by Hellenism all over the empire.
Entonces ahora estamos empezando de los cristianos y como que ellos fueron influidos por medio de todos los judíos que se fueron a todas partes del mundo en la diáspora.
And so many of these Christians, when they converted, they were already Hellenistic Jews.
Entonces muchos de los cristianos cuando se convirtieron, porque se convirtieron por medio de esa gente, ya ellos creían en esa forma de helenismo.
So very early, the Christians began defending themselves with these new concepts, with these new ideas taken from Philo.
Entonces los cristianos, para defender a sí mismos y su religión, empezó a usar esa idea de Filo.
What they wanted the world to see was that their faith was relevant.
Lo que querían que todo el mundo se vea es que su fe era relevante.
Anybody have any questions over that before we go on? Any comments?
Preguntas, comentarios.
Fascinating.
Then when Jesus were young,
Mm-hmm.
he was also influenced
Yeah.
by that Hellenistic.
Yeah, these ideas were already spreading during Jesus' day. Mm-hmm.
And he was agreed.
Well,
What do you think?
I don't know. We'll have to.
We have to ask him.
Yeah, we'll have to ask Jesus what he thinks about it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Eh?
But just by the way that you are talking about,
Mhm.
all the Jews were influenced 100%.
Yes. Yeah.
This guy should almost be a saint. This guy should almost be a saint.
Yes, all the Jews were influenced by Hellenism. Whether they agreed with it or not, they had to come face to face with it. Mm-hmm. So now let's look at the Greco-Roman society in which the Christians lived inside and outside of Palestine.
Entonces, a ver la sociedad de greco-romano, a donde vivían los cristianos dentro de Palestina y fuera de Palestina.
So I sent you that picture of the Roman Empire on WhatsApp, and that's the Mediterranean basin. And so the Mediterranean basin is where the Christianity spread.
Entonces, la foto de WhatsApp es donde está la cuenca de como Mediterránea, y eso es donde todo el cristianismo desapareció por toda esa parte.
So in each one of these communities, they each kept their laws and their customs, but it's kind of like the states in the United States. Each state has their laws, but the federal government has laws over them. The Romans had laws that they incorporated over everyone, but each one still had their customs and traditions.
Entonces, cada uno de los sitios era como un estado o como aquí una provincia, y cada provincia tenía su forma de hacer las cosas, pero aparte de eso había un gobierno arriba de todo.
So the early Christians were living under two things. They were living under Greek Hellenism and they were living under Roman law.
Entonces los cristianos vivían por dos cosas. Primero el helenismo, la forma de pensar, helenismo, y la otra por el imperio Roma.
So the good thing about all this was that there were some advantages for the Christians, like the Romans had built all these roads, and Christianity could spread rapidly, and the roads were guarded, and so they could travel safely.
Entonces había ventajas también de eso, incluso la carretera, porque había mucha carretera romana y los cristianos tenían la forma de viajar mucho más rápido, y también esa carretera estaba guardada por medio de la gente de Roma, entonces más seguro.
The biggest threat to travel during this time period, because of the safety of the Roman Empire, was really the weather.
Entonces el peligro en ese momento más grande era solamente el clima o la temperatura.
So what's interesting to note, and I want you guys to understand, is Christians reached the new Roman Empire not always by evangelists or missionaries, but by merchants, by traders, by workers, as slaves, because some Christians were slaves. So they reached these areas not by, official evangelists or missionaries, but through their jobs, through their
Había
lives.
muchos cristianos también que avanzaba el reino de Dios, que no eran misioneros, ni pastores, ni maestros, eran gente de comercio, pero cristianos.
I want us to look at Acts chapter 28, verses 11 through 14.
Entonces, Hechos 28, 11 a 14.
Acts 28. Sorry.
Gustavo, you want to read that for us in Spanish today?
Yeah, what was it?
Acts chapter 28, 11 through 14.
Okay. Pasados 3 meses, nos hicimos a la vela en una nave alejandrina que había invernado en la isla, la cual tenía por enseña a Cástor y Pólux. Y llegados a Siracusa, estuvimos allí 3 días. De allí, costeando alrededor, llegamos a Regio. Y otro día después, soplando el viento sur, llegamos al segundo día a Puteoli, donde habiendo hallado hermanos, nos rogaron que nos quedásemos con ellos 7 días. Y luego fuimos a Roma, de donde, oyendo de nosotros los hermanos, salieron a recibirnos hasta el foro de Apio y las 3 tabernas. Y al verlos, Pablo dio gracias a Dios y cobró aliento. Cuando llegamos a Roma, el centurión entregó los presos al prefecto militar, pero a Pablo se le permitió vivir aparte, con un soldado que le custodiase.
Okay, so I want you guys to notice something very important in this passage. You guys see what it is?
Algo muy importante en el pasaje. ¿Alguien puede notar lo que es?
When they arrived in Rome.
When they arrived in Rome, what?
Cuando
Twin
llegaba a
brothers.
Roma,
What happened when they arrived in
¿qué
Rome?
pasó?
They have a special treat with Pablo, no?
Who?
The centurion, no?
The centurions? No. What?
No?
I want you guys to see who did Paul stay with in Rome when he arrived?
¿Con quién que estaba quedándose Pablo
With
cuando
his
llegó
soldier.
a Roma?
With what?
With the soldier, con un soldado.
With who?
Soldier.
Soldier. That's what he said. No?
With the other believers.
Oh.
Oh, she's reading down at the end,
I
the
got it,
16th.
soldier, brother.
We're talking about the very beginning.
Read up.
All right.
Read that for us, Kristen. Just that one part.
Oh.
There we found some brothers who invited us to spend a week with them, and so we came to Rome.
I want you guys to pay very close attention to that. Paul was the
And
main
then they sailed, brother.
Paul was the main missionary of the Christianity. And when he arrives in Rome for the first time ever, there's already believers there. And he spent a week with them.
Que era importante notar que Pablo era el primer misionero, pero cuando llegaba a Roma ya había creyentes en Roma.
So,
Does your Bible not say Castor and Pollux? It just says brothers.
I've got brethren. Where we
Castor and
found
Paulus
brethren.
were the figureheads
interesting.
of the ship.
Castor
Yeah.
and Pollux are
Which verse is
what?
that?
Castor,
¿Qué versículo
Castor and
es?
Pollux are very.
what verse is that,
Where
Kristen?
gods, he's talking about the figureheads of the gods. It was an
Trojan.
Alexandrian ship.
Everybody see that? What verse is that, Kristen?
Yeah, 14.
11.
Verse 14. Verse 14.
Oh, the believers was
And you
14,
think
yeah.
that is
But-
believers?
Yes, that is believers.
Wow.
Those are Christians. So when Paul arrives for the first time ever in his life to Rome, he stays with Christians.
That's fascinating.
So Paul was not the first to bring the faith to Rome. He was not the first.
Que Pablo no era el primero.
Mhm.
they reached
Mhm. Yeah,
Que
that's
Pablo
right.
no era el primero para llevar la palabra de Dios a Roma.
And so when Luke and them arrived, there's already believers there. They stay with them for a week.
Que ya había gente que eran creyentes y ellos pasaban una semana con ellos.
So the first ones to bring the faith to Rome were traders, businessmen, merchants, and slaves.
Entonces
But it's also
eso
the
significa
speed.
que
The
la
speed is
fe
amazing.
llegaba a Roma por medio
Yeah.
de gente
There's
de
no
comercio y
Well,
esclavos.
nothing. It's just, it's already there.
But they had those Roman roads, which were excellent.
Esa
It's
carretera
fascinating
romana.
that, I mean, I love Rome
Mhm.
and then what they did, but it's fascinating that they had all this amazing structure. And since the end of Rome, all they have invented is pizza.
The pizza's pretty great.
Lo entendiste, ¿verdad? Que tenía tantas cosas un imperio romano y en el final solo quedaba con pizza.
So I want to talk about some of the bad stuff because not all was good in the Greco-Roman world with the believers.
Que no todo era bueno en el mundo greco-romano con la gente creyente.
So one of the ideas of to bring unity was through religious unity.
Una de las ideas para traer unidad era unidad religiosa.
So Greece and Rome sought religious unity in two forms.
Entonces Grecia y Roma tenían dos formas de intentar a tener unidad religiosa.
One was through syncretism of their religions,
El sincretismo de sus religiones era una de las formas
and the other was through emperor worship.
y otro era la adoración imperial.
And so through the Romans had different names for their gods than the Greeks did, but they were the same gods.
Los romanos tenían diferentes nombres para sus dioses, pero los dioses eran igual que los de los griegos.
So the syncretism was a really easy process.
Entonces el sincretismo era un proceso muy fácil.
And so the Roman pantheon was a temple with all of these gods from all over the world.
Entonces el panteón de Roma era dioses de todas las partes del mundo.
And so all of these Roman gods and Greek gods and these ideas, they found themselves on the Roman roads and in the marketplaces.
Entonces esa idea de adoración a los dioses paganos se llegaba a todos los sitios por medio de comercio también.
In fact, the Romans and the Greeks, they syncretized so well, and the Egyptians, they syncretized their gods so well that it's now almost impossible at times to discern their origin.
en Egipto era que los griegos y los romanos hizo ese sincretismo de sus dioses tanto que ahora es difícil incluso decir cuál era de romano y cuál era griego, los dioses.
Syncretism was basically the fashion of the day.
Entonces, sincretismo
Philo doing
era
exactly
como
the same
la
thing.
moda.
You know?
Philo was
No,
there.
they probably had a Philo.
Oh yeah.
Trying to synchronize.
Oh, yeah.
that, you know, the same
Yeah,
thing.
they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people used to worship the gods of their parents before that time, but after that time, they worshiped the God of their choice.
Entonces, antes de ese tiempo, cada familia adoraba a un dios de los antepasados, de su familia, pero cuando llegaba a ese punto, ellos adoraban a cualquier dios que quería.
And even historians today have a hard time figuring out which god goes to which culture because they're so mixed together.
Incluso
They're just
los
melted.
estudiosos todavía no están muy seguros de los dioses, cuál cultura es de cada dios de antes.
Does this sound familiar today?
Eso parece familiar para nosotros en el día de hoy.
Nothing has changed in 2,000 years.
Nada ha cambiado en 2000 años.
Christians were viewed as a religious cancer that had to be cut out of
Que
society
los cristianos era como un cáncer religioso que quería quitárselo,
because they rigidly worshipped one God.
porque era muy estricto de adorar solo un Dios.
And many of the Greco-Roman people, they viewed Christians as atheists.
Y mucho de la gente en esa época greco-romano, ellos pensaban en los cristianos como ateos.
Because they didn't believe and they refused to worship the pantheon of gods and the emperor.
Porque no creían todos los dioses y también negaba de adorar a el emperador por medio de la adoración imperial.
So nothing brought more persecution to the Christians than their refusal to worship the emperor.
Entonces traía mucha persecución eso de negar a adorar el emperador.
Because the imperial worship was intended as a means to unify the empire and to test one's loyalty.
Porque la adoración imperial era para unirse a toda la gente, pero también hacer una prueba de tu fidelidad.
So if you refused to burn incense on the altar of the emperor, you were seen as being treasonous.
Entonces, si tú fueras una persona que negaba de poner incenso por adelante del emperador y adorarle, tú eras como traicionando el imperio.
And so the Christians, they were condemned as being disloyal.
Entonces los cristianos fueron condenados a ser como desleal al imperio.
We got through this really quick today, so does anybody have anything you want to talk about?
Pero
Or
hemos llegado a
It's
ese
revolutionary,
punto
isn't
muy
it?
Yes.
rápido.
I mean,
Si
you
hay
really
otra
think about it,
pregunta.
coming from many gods to one.
Mhm.
It's kind of absolutely revolutionary.
Yeah,
Ajá.
yeah. So how do you think the Romans and Greeks, they viewed Christians? How do you think they saw them?
Entonces, ¿tú cómo crees que ellos han visto a los cristianos, los romanos y los griegos?
But I can understand them a little bit because if you were used to many gods and I don't know, you got Paul or something, I don't know, and you said, pray to the God of money. It's nice and easy. I pray to the God of money, get money. And you got ill, pray to the God of illness, I get well.
Mhm.
So it's kind of for a human mind, it's kind of, I get that. We pray that God for that God for that. It's easy.
Mhm.
Para la
One
mente,
God, what?
por el cerebro humano es fácil pensar en orar para una cosa, como va a Dios para dinero y va a otro Dios para éxito, y así se pueden hacerlo como chequear las cosas.
I understand much more than many gods in that time
Yeah.
than one God, because that's crazy.
But
Mm.
we
I
still
would pray
have
to the
some
money
of-
God, I need money.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we still have some of those, even in
No, I know,
in
I
the
was thinking
Christian,
this.
in
I
the
was-
Catholic
Catholic,
Church.
yeah.
You got San Pancracio that you worship him to find you a job. You could,
Yeah.
you put parsley to him because if you got parsley to him, it's
But
like
I understand
worshiping.
it. I understand
You
it.
got another one for health.
Can you give him my resume?
But I understand it, and I can see why they did it, because it makes sense. You know, I need transport, I need a car, but it makes sense to me. With one God? What? No.
We will go over that in this.
Esa es buena pregunta.
It's strange.
Plus it came with a lot of rituals, I imagine. So each individual god had, like you're saying, with the god of parsley, but I don't know. Yeah, I know it's the same. But yeah, so each Greek god, they had some sort of ritual, some sort of
Probably money or sacrifice.
that went with them. So if you're not only are you not do you not consider yourself a believer in any of them, but you're not conducting those rituals, which made you even more
Outcast. Yeah, you seem like, man, those guys
You're
are
not even
weird.
following the rules.
Yeah.
Entonces,
They talk-
I think that's what
Those
they
guys-
Let me explain. Socialmente, si hay gente escuchando en
Ajá.
español, socialmente pensando que no estaba haciendo las tradiciones, como diciendo de perejil o de otra cosa, tradicionalmente que no estaba haciéndolo. Entonces la gente pensaba que eran gente un poco rara porque no estaba participando en la sociedad.
And probably they were worshipping different gods because that would generate money to them. And if
Well,
you
some
don't
of
do
them,
it-
prosperity.
But that, I think you do that because that's what you're taught. So you would do it. I think more interesting is they weren't following any rules at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's because you had to be regulated to pray to these gods. You had to do stuff, and they weren't. It was like we're not doing anything. It's Jesus. That's it.
One of the things we're going to talk about.
No, you don't like it? It's Jesus. That's it.
You want to translate that?
No.
So
Because I forgot the first part.
one of the things we're going to talk about is in our groups is how, today our society is no different today. We worship all kinds of things in our society today, and Christianity is seen no different than what it was 2,000 years ago. When they were only worshiping one God.
Que la sociedad no está muy diferente el día de hoy porque los cristianos también están adorando diferentes cosas del mundo.
But your point is amazing because, your point's amazing because I've always just thought of Jesus. It's not really. It's devastation of history. Really, that's that gone. Now it's Jesus, and I never even thought about it. It's like it's finished. Everything you've ever done is finished.
Not finished. We carry on with the same mistakes.
I know that, Anna, but in
But
this
it
time,
should be.
I think people were more religious in this time than they are now. And in this time, this would have been huge.
But think about the religions of today. How Eastern religions have melted with Western religions, and all these, and now it's hard to discern what's Eastern and what's Western, right?
Entonces, pensando en el sincretismo, todavía eso que está sucediendo, que hay diferentes religiones que están mezclándose en el día de hoy, y es difícil saber lo que es pura.
So next week we are going to do part 3. This was part 1. Let me give you the group questions, and then we'll turn off this video.
How
So
about with part 2?
Yeah, what happened to part 2?
this was part 2. I'm sorry. Last week was part 1. This is part 2. Next week will be part 3.
Okay, good.
So
Are we going to a different century next week?
no, we're still going to be in first century, I
Okay,
think.
pero la semana que viene vamos a estar todavía en el primer siglo, pero que lo hemos terminado con la segunda parte del día de hoy.
Can I just say, who's happy we've done this Bible study?
I think all of us
I'm
are
happy.
Christians.
It is but yes, it's the best, huh? Really? Wow.
So here's your questions for you at home watching. How can we make our faith relevant and credible within the philosophical context of our current society? How can we reach the world with the gospel through our jobs and lives? Compare our culture with the Greco-Roman culture and how can you relate to the first century church? So that was Taking a Step Back, part 2.
Entonces, con esas preguntas, lo vamos a terminar con esas preguntas. Y en tu casa tú puedes pensar en esas preguntas. ¿Cómo podríamos hacer nuestra fe pertinente y creíble por medio en el contexto filosófico de nuestra sociedad? ¿Cómo podríamos alcanzar al mundo con el evangelio en el día de hoy a través por nuestros trabajos o por nuestro círculo de influencia? Haga una comparación de la cultura greco-romana y lo de nuestro. ¿Cómo puedes identificar con los cristianos del primer siglo?